There's this sort of dark, unspoken paradox in the financial world. Most of us are going to spend our entire lives absolutely obsessing over how to generate cash while completely ignoring the treacherous psychological landscape of what happens after you actually get it. We are constantly bombarded with strategies for hustling, building, and aggressively climbing the economic ladder. But the raw psychology of keeping that money, well, that is a completely different game. Getting rich is hard, but staying rich is even harder. It's a chilling reality, isn't it? The world is just full of brilliant, highly capable people who manage to scale the financial mountain, only to plunge right back down into crushing bankruptcies. We've all seen the headlines: self-made millionaires, explosive entrepreneurs, Wall Street titans who somehow managed to lose it all. So today, we're dissecting the psychology of money to understand exactly why this happens, and more importantly, how you can survive the emotional traps that destroy massive fortunes. Act 1. The Tragedy of Ego. The Fall. Okay, let's dive right in. Good investing isn't really about making perfect decisions. Honestly, it's about consistently not screwing up. Think about the story of this brilliantly successful Wi-Fi tech executive. Back in his 20s, he designed and patented a key component used in global routers, and he acquired staggering wealth. But his relationship with that money was dangerously insecure. He literally carried bricks of cash around just to project power. One day, he bought thousands of dollars in solid gold coins, took his friends to a dock overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and just skipped those coins into the water like rocks. Literally, just to prove he could. But that kind of financial hubris, it always has an expiration date. He eventually went completely broke. And this isn't just a modern phenomenon either. Take Jesse Livermore. He was the greatest stock market trader of the 1920s. By age 30, he had amassed the inflation-adjusted equivalent of $100 million. I mean, he had definitively won the game of capitalism. But that immense wealth gave him what he later called a fatal swelled head. He started feeling absolutely invincible. That dangerous hubris completely blinded him, leading to uncalculated, reckless risks that ultimately erased his entire fortune. It ended in total tragic ruin. Let's look at a really sharp contrast between two incredibly different lives. On one side, you have Richard Fuscone, a Harvard MBA, a Merrill Lynch executive, an absolute titan of finance. On the other side, Ronald Reed, a humble rural janitor and gas station attendant whose main hobby was, literally, just chopping firewood. By all conventional logic, Fuscone is the obvious financial winner here. But Fuscone was driven by a massive ego. He borrowed heavily to fund this extravagant luxury lifestyle. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, his heavily leveraged empire collapsed into foreclosure. He was completely ruined. Ronald Reed, meanwhile, he lived quietly, invested patiently in blue-chip stocks, and died with an estate worth over $8 million. This reveals a terrifying paradox. The very skills required to get wealthy are the exact opposites of the skills required to stay wealthy. Think about it. Getting money requires taking massive risks, boundless optimism, and putting yourself out there. It requires this relentless drive to just keep pushing forward. But keeping money, that requires a healthy dose of paranoia, extreme frugality, and deep humility. You have to accept the hard truth that yesterday's success does absolutely nothing to guarantee tomorrow's survival. Act 2. The Art of Survival. The Anchor. Let this number really sink in for a second. 40%. Capitalism is, well, it's totally ruthless. 40% of companies that are successful enough to become publicly traded in the US stock market eventually lose effectively all of their value over time. That is a massive systemic wipeout rate. It proves that survival is never guaranteed, no matter how vast your resources are or how big the building with your name on it is. Listen to Michael Moritz. He's the billionaire head of Sequoia Capital, which is one of the most successful venture capital firms in history. When he was asked how Sequoia prospered for 4 decades in an industry where most firms completely collapse in 5 years, he didn't credit sheer brilliance. He credited fear. He said, "We've always been afraid of going out of business." They survived because they maintained a constant paranoid fear of being wiped out, operating every single day on the core assumption that tomorrow won't be like yesterday. 14. That is the exact number of economic recessions Warren Buffett has lived through and survived without panicking. When you look at long-term financial success, it's almost never about making the most brilliant trades or magically catching the absolute bottom of a market. Often, it's simply about standing your ground while everyone else around you is losing their minds in late-night market sell-offs. Survival itself is the ultimate financial superpower. So how did Buffett actually achieve that kind of survival? Well, it's not really a masterclass in what he did. It's a masterclass in what he aggressively avoided. He didn't panic and sell during terrifying market crashes. He didn't rely on borrowed money to inflate his returns. He didn't attach himself to fleeting passing trends, and he didn't burn himself out. By simply avoiding catastrophic mistakes, he built this impenetrable fortress around his wealth. Act 3. The Invisible Shield. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. It is the ultimate irony of materialism. We buy flashy cars and massive homes because we're craving respect and admiration from our peers, right? But the hard truth is, using your capital just to feed your ego usually results in having far less actual wealth, and ironically, a lot less genuine respect. Humility brings far more respect than horsepower ever will. We really need to understand a massive, hidden psychological difference here. The difference between being rich and being wealthy. You see, rich is a current visible income. If you see someone driving a $100,000 car, they are rich. They have the immediate cash flow to afford that payment. It's loud, it's highly visible, and it feeds the ego. But wealth? Wealth is completely hidden. It is income not spent. Wealth is the invisible shield of options, flexibility, and absolute independence. You can't actually see wealth, because it's the sports cars not purchased, the first-class upgrades declined, and the luxury watches left sitting in the store. So how do we actually build that invisible shield? By completely redefining what it means to save. Savings is simply the gap between your ego and your income. Savings money isn't just some cold mathematical interest rate calculation. It is a daily, grueling, psychological battle of humility against the desperate urge to show off. If you truly want to increase your wealth, you don't necessarily need to raise your income, you need to lower your ego. Act 4. The Power of Compounding. If you can survive the sheer financial chaos and actually keep your ego in check, you unlock the heaviest lifting force in finance. But this absolute necessity of survival means you must leave room for error. You have to plan on the plan not going according to plan. I mean, you can map out a perfect 20-year spreadsheet, sure, but a spreadsheet cannot predict September 11th, a massive housing crash, or a global pandemic. Leaving a margin of safety, like holding cash and living well below your means, is literally the only way to protect yourself from catastrophic global shocks. Why go to all this trouble? Well, Charlie Munger hit the nail on the head. The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. The entire point of being financially unbreakable, of holding a massive safety net of cash, even when a roaring bull market is making you feel like an absolute fool for missing out, is so that when the inevitable crash happens, you are never forced to sell. You survive the panic, and your compounding continues entirely uninterrupted. Ultimately, the most powerful financial strategy isn't some complex trading algorithm. It's simply staying in the game long enough for compounding to actually work. The next time you're tempted by a flashy gain or an ego-driven purchase, you have to stop and ask yourself, is this helping me stay in the game, or is it risking my survival? So as you look at your own finances today, ask yourself the really hard question. Are you building wealth just to look good right now, or are you building an invisible shield to guarantee your total freedom tomorrow?